Hello and welcome to Trash to Track. Now in this episode I'm going to be looking at this Hornby Princess Royal class that I've had in my collection in the overhaul queue for a number of months, if not probably over a year. Now this front buffer here is broke, the body shell on the model is in pretty bad condition, there's several glue marks, lamps glued on it. The model itself isn't in too bad condition, tender drawbars missing, there's just two loose wires, and the tender there is very dusty, there's a glue mark there as well. But what I actually have in stock, I've got another body shell for this model without all the glue marks. And I have a lot of Princess Royal spares because there were several of these traded in at the model shop about a year or so ago. And all of them, apart from the one you see on the bench, had got Mazak rot. So I bought the loco sections and ended up getting quite a few spares out of that. So the Mazak rot, it does have a good side. You can build up your spares pool quite readily with Mazak rot models, which is what I've done here. Now I'm hoping this model hasn't got Mazak rot, so we're going to give it a quick test to see if it runs. If it's totally seized, then we've had it, but we'll see what happens when I put battery on this track. Putting a battery there, the model does initially start to move, and with a bit of encouragement it is trying to go, but there's obviously something wrong there. It's not running at all well. So we'll strip this down and have a look what's going on. So to remove the body shell, you have to remove this screw under the smoke box. Now if you take one of these apart, do be careful, there is a big metal spacer piece in there, and I believe that's because the chassis is also used for the Princess Coronation class. Now I was surprised when I took this off. I thought this was a DCC ready model, but it's just the one that predates it. There's the spacer piece there that I said about. But yeah, this model just predates the DCC ready versions, which were the ones with Mazak rot. So hopefully we'll get away with this and I can restore this to running order. Now there's some detail missing under the cab there, and on the spare body shell, bizarrely, that's got the bit on. So it's a bit weird. The bit that was missing on the original body shell is present on the replacement, and the buffer that's missing on the replacement is present on the original. Bit of a mix and match, but the buffer pulls out and then I just gently push it back in there with the spring and it clips back in place. So that's that repaired, and I'll glue that detail part on later. Now I've skipped forward a bit here. I lost some footage, but all I've done is strip the model down. I've took the rear pony truck off and the front pony truck and the gearbox cover. This was all taken off, and I'm also now going to loosen this motor mount, and I'm going to remove the motor, which is held in place with black tack, because I want to get a look at this idler gear, make sure this isn't split. Obviously this is a common thing on Hornby models for that gear to split. The chassis is fairly free running. The rear axle seems a bit sticky, so I'm going to have to sort that out. And a pair of side snips, I just cut the wires off the motor there, because I am going to DCC fit this. And I'm also going to remove this stupid capacitor thing, because one, it's damaged, and two, I don't need it on DCC. Testing the motor with a battery proves that the motor is a nice runner when I can get the tabs lined up. So I've upended the chassis now, and I'm going to start by cleaning all the stuff off now. With cotton bud and meths into the gearbox cover, that hardened white grease that Hornby uses all cleaned off. And then I'm going to clean all the grease and that off the idler gear. There are no cracks or anything in this, so this is perfectly reusable, which is good news. Makes a change to open one of these up, and this isn't cracked, if I'm honest, when I'm doing repairs. And then I'm going to clean the wheels. Now you can see the wheels have got a golden tint to them. That's because the plating's worn off. And I checked all the wheels that I've got off those other princesses, and they were all the same. It's just a thing with Hornby models of this era. The plating's very thin, and after several years of use, it wears down to the brass or the copper, what the wheels are made out of. I assume it's brass, but it still runs okay. You've just got to keep it clean. They get dirtier quicker when they've lost the plating. So you can see on the cotton bud just how much dirt's coming off this model. It really is filthy under here. And this rear axle is sticky, so I'm going to remove the crank pins, and then I'm going to remove the base keeper plate. Now I didn't want to remove the base because those pickups are dodgy. It's those stupid clip-in brass pickups that have to be in exactly right, otherwise they don't work. But because of the amount of dirt I've found under this model, I've got no choice. And I also want to have a look at that rear axle because it is very draggy and sticky. So I remove the 3 screws, the base keeper lifts off. There are the pickups, but then they are actually stuck down quite readily. One of them is hardwired in, but they are stuck down pretty well. Now there's a clip under the rear wheel each side that you have to undo, and once you've undone the clip, the whole thing lifts out. Now luckily for me, as I'm DCC fitting this, I've cut the wires. I can actually lift this clear of the model. Now if that was all connected, you'd have a hell of a job getting in there to clean all that up. So the rear axle is indeed sticky. It's got that horrible greenish oil on it, so I'm going to give that a clean up with a cotton bud of mess. And then I'm going to clean all the chassis up and get all that nice and clean. Now that bit of masking tape you can see there, that is important. If you ever do any maintenance on one of these, keep that tape in place or replace it. That stops the pickup shorting out onto the die-cast chassis. So that is important, that piece of tape. So I clean all around the bearings, all around the axles, remove any fluff and debris that I find. And them two are quite loose. So now this one's all nice and this one's all nice and cleaned. I make sure it's in the right way. Bits of polystyrene from the box there on the wheel spokes. I'll get rid of that. And there's still more crud in there, so I'm going to give it another go over. I also thoroughly clean the wheel backs while the wheels are out of the chassis as well, because obviously you need good contact to have this model as a good runner. So it looks like when I give that the battery test a minute ago, it was just dirt that was preventing this from running. So the wheel now spins freely. It's all been cleaned, so I'm going to put a drop of oil on the bearings with this pin dropper, just so that it's all nice and properly lubricated. Once I've done that, I also added a very small amount of Labelle 106 grease to those gears you can see, and then I can replace the keeper plate with the pickups on. So I lift the keeper plate back up, make sure the pickups are not bent. These are also quite dirty, so again with a cotton bud of mess I'm going to clean all the pickups, get all the fluff and dirt off each one of these. So this model's obviously had a lot of running in its time. The dirt on it was surprising. I didn't think it would be this dirty. But now we've got the age-old problem that the pickups keep moving, so what I do, put the base plate on, and then with tweezers squeeze the pickups back to where they need to be, hold the base plate in, and then screw it down. It is a bit involved, but if you don't get those pickups back in behind the brake shoes, they just won't work properly and make contact with the chassis or the pickups. And then the side rods were both screwed back in with the crank pins, because I took this out to remove that axle. So they were all replaced as well. Just using this hex nut driver just to tighten those up. So now I'll turn the model back over onto its wheels, and I'm going to clean out this horrible hardened white grease that's in the gearbox housing. The chassis is a lot more smoother now, so that's good news. I'm going to clean the all that dirt out of the worm gear, and I'm going to use some contact cleaner. Now, contrary to what people put in the comments, WD-40 contact cleaner is not the same as WD-40. I'm not stupid. I don't use WD-40 on the models. It is just the electrical contact cleaner to clean up the parts, so people needn't worry about that in the future. Once everything's cleaned, I put the idler gear back in, add a small amount of oil on those on the shaft there where it spins. The motor's put back in place, and then again a bit of Labelle 106 on the worm gear, and that will work its way through the drivetrain and lubricate all the drive gears correctly. And then the gearbox cover is put back on. I also put a small amount of oil on the bearing, because I don't know when this model was last serviced, if it's ever been serviced, so it's always handy to do that. And the screw that holds the gearbox cover on also provides one of the pickups for the model, so you have to make sure the tab's in place with that red wire on. This is then done up. when I can get that wire out the way. And then the motor retaining bracket is put back on, and this is screwed in from underneath when I can get it to sit properly, that is. And this is screwed in from underneath, and that holds everything together. So that's the driving wheels and the gear train and the motor and everything all serviced. So I then clean the wheels on the pony truck. And again, cotton bud and mess just to remove all the dirt and that's built up on the wheel treads. And those spare parts have come in handy because I've actually got a tender drawbar off another Princess Royal. And what I've done is this was all connected to the entire wiring loom. So the bit of red tape there on the wire that I've put on, that denotes that goes to the red wire on the loco. So I'm going to wire this up correctly when I fit DCC. It's just handy to do that because obviously all the wires are black and it saves a guessing game when I'm wiring this up. So I screw that in. Luckily, the original screw for the tender drawbar was still in there. So I don't know if somebody took it off in the past to try and mend it. Oh, I'd got that wrong there. I'd put that screw in, but it hadn't shouldered properly. And now it allows that drawbar to pivot. But yeah, it was lucky that screw was still there. The spring's put back in. That is the spring for the rear pony truck. And then the retaining screw, this long screw, is put in through the spring, and then everything is screwed back together. I leave the front pony wheel off because it's easier to screw the body back on with that out of the way. And I've also got to fit a front coupling to that, so I'll do that later on. So what I'm going to do now, off camera, I'm going to fit a DCC decoder to this model. I've got this one here that works, and it also works on DC, this chip. So I solder that all up with the orange and grey wires to the motor terminals and do the pickups. And here we are, jumped forward again, and the chassis is now DCC fitted. And I am going to test it with the battery. I know this DCC decoder is DC compatible. So I'm just going to give it a quick test. And there we go, a running chassis. So it was just a build-up of fluff and dirt over the years that was preventing this Princess from running. Now I've got the tender up now. I'm using a piece of track to hold it. I couldn't use my loco cradle at this point in this video because I actually got another loco in bits in the cradle, which I'm waiting parts for a future episode. So I'll have to improvise. But removing the wheels on the tender, you remove that base plate and the wheels just clip out. And again, the tender was just full of fluff and dirt on all the pickups. So this was all thoroughly cleaned up. And the wheels and the wheel backs were cleaned because off camera, when I DCC fitted it, I did actually test the model with the tender, and there was no electrical current coming from the tender whatsoever. It wasn't, when you lifted the drive wheels off the rails for the loco stopped, which proved the tender was actually providing no power. And I'm not surprised, because cleaning it up, there was a lot of fluff and that in here, a lot of it. So cleaning it all out, and a couple of the pickups were bent out of shape. So I put all them back to where they should be. Clean all the wheel treads up. And as I said, these wheels just sit. They're a clip fit into some plastic lugs. There's no proper bearings or anything. They just push down. But when you do refit them, you have to be careful to make sure you don't bend the pickups. So now that the tender's been fully serviced, connect it back to the loco. And I'm going to balance the battery onto the rails here if I can. No, it's going to fall over. When I can get it to stand up. Oh, whoops, all fingers and thumbs. The loco wheels are off the rails, and the tender there, that proves that the tender's picking up, so that's good. Now, I've glued the detail parts back on, and when I do these steam engine, my dad always says, you should put a crew in it. Well, there you go. There's a crew in this one. There's a driver and fireman in this Princess Royal. And I'm going to refit the body shell back to the chassis. That spacer piece needs to go in. That sits over the lug with the screw receptacle in it. And then making sure the wires off that trailing bogie are either side of the chassis and the clip. The chassis clips in place in the firebox area. And then you screw it down at the front. Initially it wouldn't go down properly. And I thought that DCC decoder was in the way. But it ended up being the wires at the back weren't quite seated correctly. So once I'd moved them, the screw was replaced. and the chassis was in. Now the front bogie, I've actually used there's the front coupling, sorry, I put on. I've actually replaced this with one of those ones that had Mazak rot, because the front bogie on the model that originally came, the paint was flaking off it and it was showing signs that potentially had Mazak rot. So I'll keep that aside and keep an eye on it. Now, some people may say, why have you put a front coupling on it? If you're not familiar, I've got a preserved railway that runs in the garden that's end to end. So the trains have to run round, which is why I require a front coupling. But now the model's actually running quite nicely, and I'm ready to put it into service and test it. Hornby's Princess Royal class is a really nice looking engine and does have a presence on a layout, especially in this LMS maroon. The model's over a foot long. It's over 12 inches long, and it's gigantic. And I'm pleased that we've got this looking nice. I could have gone to town and worked on this spare body shell, removing the glue and that, but it was just a bit too much work. And I didn't fancy doing a repaint job or anything, because the Hornby paint job on this is actually really quite nice. If you've got an engine or anything you need repairing or DCC fitting and would like to send it in for repair, please contact me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. Who knows, it may even feature in an episode of Trash to Track in the future. So I'm going to put the Princess Royal for its prices on the garden railway, running with some LMS stock that I have. And you'll notice the middle coach is sitting a lot higher than the others. And I didn't notice this when running, but when editing the movie or editing the video, it's not actually clipped on its chassis properly. So I didn't notice that at the time. But I hope you'll agree this really does look splendid running in the garden. So thanks so much again for watching Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe. And I will catch you all in the next video. Bye for now.